The presidential pardon of Jack Johnson is in danger of producing some unintended and unwelcome consequences. The very act that has put Johnson in the spotlight could also keep the spotlight from ever finding him again. For the past 2 decades, Johnson has stayed on the cultural radar for 3 reasons: Ken Burns' 2004 Unforgivable Blackness documentary, the occasional cable airings of 1970s, The Great White Hope, and the quest, by his family and a handful of politicians, to get him a pardon. The world heavyweight title fight against Jim Jeffries that threw the nation into a racist fury was in 1910. His reign as champion ended in 1915. His 7-year exile from the United States ended in 1920. And he's been dead since 1946. More, President Trump grants posthumous pardon to Jack Johnson. Muhammad Ali was 4 years old then. Jackie Robinson was still playing in the minor leagues. Their narratives in life and death stand in stark contrast to Johnson's. There's no threat that either will ever be lost to history. They're known best for what their lives meant, not what they were denied. But they walk the path Jack Johnson cleared decades earlier. In a time when rigid segregation was the law of the land, black people were second-class citizens and black athletes were routinely barred from even competing against whites, Johnson became the first black world heavyweight champion. The magnitude of that under the conditions of the black population in the early 1900s grows more inconceivable with time. So does the strength of the backlash that resulted, not just from being the champ, but from refusing to subjugate his personality to the norms of the day. In time, he became identified more by the backlash than by his groundbreaking ring success. Johnson seemingly forever has been a symbol, not just of grievous yet typical injustice, but of a fight America never should have started and didn't know how to finish. If he isn't that anymore, then who is he to current and future generations? Even by the end of the day that President Donald Trump pardoned him, the story was being swallowed by other events. Just in sports, it was preempted hours earlier by, in an irony few have missed so far, the president's "maybe you shouldn't be in the country" reaction to the NFL's national anthem policy. The math is easy. It had been 105 years since Jack Johnson, in the prime of his career and the height of his fame, was convicted of, essentially, dating white women, an egregious stretch of the Federal Mann Act at the time. On the day Johnson was pardoned, the president threatened deportation of the black players who star in today's version of the nation's most popular sport. More, former NFL player sounds off on shallowness of anthem debate. The pardon did Johnson a favor, but maybe not as great of one as it seems. Those 72 years were not kind to Johnson's legacy. Or, put more directly, those who should have protected and projected his legacy were not kind to him. Jack Johnson's fading claim to fame is the result. That brings us back to Robinson, and Ali, and Joe Louis and a handful of others whose roles as trailblazers in sports and society were immortalized in countless ways. Their names are on statues, sculptures, streets, schools, stadiums, arenas, awards, foundations, fields, parks, pools, gyms, college courses, and, of course, the walls of every major league ballpark. For what it's worth, the accolades came mostly after either their deaths or incapacitations, long after their threat levels had diminished. Jack Johnson hasn't even gotten that benefit, though. His hometown of Galveston, Texas, created a park and erected a statue in his honor, in 2012. A street through a poor neighborhood, not surprisingly, was named for him in the early 1980s. Those efforts were pushed by a handful of people and opposed by waves of others spanning generations. One early statue attempt had to be taken down because it had been defaced so often. That leaves this country with as many statues to the man many still call the greatest heavyweight ever as to a movie character. That would, of course, be Philadelphia's Rocky statue. Trump credits Sylvester Stallone, rather than all those who advocated for decades, for convincing him to pardon Johnson. Good luck finding anything outside Galveston commemorating Johnson, who he was and what he meant. Fortune 500 companies never lined up to donate to anything like Louisville's Alley Center. There's no foundation giving out millions to students and causes like the one Jackie Robinson's widow Rachel runs. There's no sculpture of his powerful fist like the one of Lewis's in downtown Detroit. There's no boxing venue bearing his name the way the main tennis stadium for the U.S. Open is named for Arthur Ashe. ESPN gives out an annual award named for Ashe. The 2008 winners were Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Sports Illustrated gives one out named for Ali. The last year's recipient was Colin Kaepernick. Relative to his time, to America's time, to what America allowed itself to be and continues to show signs of being, Jack Johnson was bigger than all of them. His DNA runs through all the aforementioned athletes. Where does he himself live today, though? There's the movie, the documentary, and the battle to right a historic wrong. One line has now been deleted. It shouldn't mean that Jack Johnson is one step closer to descent into American oblivion.